Okay, so I've been studying for the pharmacy tech certification exam, and while looking for materials and videos to study, I realized that there's not one that I could find for the top 200 drugs. So I thought I would create my own. So please forgive any mispronunciations, and here we go. Top one starting the list, the brand name is Vicodin, and the generic of that is acetaminophen with hydrocodone, and its function is pain relief. It's a DEA Schedule 3. Then we have Prenadil, which is lisinopril. It's an ACE inhibitor. Zocor, which is simvastatin, and it's a statin drug. Synthroid, the generic of that is levothyroxine. It's used for hormone replacement. Amoxil, generic is amoxicillin. It's an antibiotic, penicillin. Then we have Zithromax, which is the azithromycin, and it's a macrolide antibiotic. Microzide, which is hydrochlorothiazide, also known as HCTZ, it's a thiazide diuretic. Norvasc, which is amlodipine, is a calcium channel blocker. Xanax, generic is alprazolam. It's a benzodiazepine, and it's a DEA Schedule 4. Glucophage, which is metformin, is an anti-diabetic. Lipitor is a torvastatin. It's a statin drug. Prilosec is a metrazole. It's a proton pump inhibitor. Augmentin is amoxicillin plus clavulanate. It's a penicillin antibiotic. Tenormin is atenolol. It's a beta blocker, B1. Lasix is furosemide. It is a diuretic. Flowpressor, the generic of that is metoprolol. It's a beta receptor blocker, B1. Zoloft is sertraline. It's an SSRI. Ambien, the generic of that is zolpidem. It's a sleep aid. It's also a DEA Schedule 4. Then we have Percocet. The generic of that is oxycodone with acetaminophen, and it's used for pain relief. It's a DEA Schedule 2. Nexium is esomeprazole. It's a proton pump inhibitor. Then we have Plavix. Generic is clopidogrel, and it's a platelet aggregation inhibitor. Singulair, generic of that is montelukast. It's a leukotriene inhibitor. Sterifred, the generic is prednisone. It's a corticosteroid. We have Lexapro. It's an escitalopram. It's an SSRI. Then Advil, generic is ibuprofen. It's an NSAID. Celexa, the generic is citalopram. It's an antidepressant, SSRI. Then we have ProAir, generic of that is albuterol. It's a B2 receptor agonist for the lungs. Prozac, the generic is fluoxetine. It's an SSRI. Then we have Neurontin, and generic is gabapentin. Its function is anticonvulsant. Coumadin, generic is warfarin. It's a blood thinner. Ultram, generic is tramadol. It's for pain relief. It's non-narcotic. Then we have Klonopin, generic is clonazepam. It's a benzodiazepine, DEA Schedule 4. Then we have Ativan, the generic of that is lorazepam. It's a benzodiazepine, DEA Schedule 4 as well. K-Flex, generic is cephalexin. It's an antibiotic, cephalosporin. Then we have Flexeril, generic is cyclobenzaprine. It's a muscle relaxant. Septra, generic is sulfamethoxazole with triamcinolone, and it's an antibiotic combination. Then there's Cipro, generic is ciprofloxacin. It's a quinolone antibiotic. Then we have Flonase. Its generic is fluticasone. It's an inhaled steroid. Then there's Diurenium. Generic is triamterene. It's a diuretic. Pravachol, generic is pravastatin. It's a cholesterol/statin drug. Then there's Crestor, and its generic is rosuvastatin. It's a statin drug. Then there's Advair. It's fluticasone with salmeterol. It's a bronchodilator and a steroid. Then there's Deseril, generic is trazodone, and it's an antidepressant. There's Darvocet, which is propoxyphene with acetaminophen, and it's used for pain relief. It's a DEA Schedule 4. Then we have Fosamax. The generic is alendronate, and it's a bone resorption inhibitor. Then there's Allegra, generic is fexofenadine. It's an antihistamine H1. Mevcor is lovastatin, cholesterol statin drug. Then there's Corex, which is clorbitolol. It's a beta receptor blocker. Then there's Paxil, generic is paroxetine. It's an SSRI. Mobic, generic is meloxicam. It's an NSAID. Valium, the generic is diazepam. It's a benzodiazepine, DEA Schedule 4. Diovan is valsartan. It's an angiotensin II receptor blocker, A2RB. Cymbalta is duloxetine. It's an antidepressant. And there's Effexor, which generic is venlafaxine. It's an antidepressant as well. Zantac, generic is ranitidine. It's a histamine blocker H2. Then there's Diflucan, generic is fluconazole. It's an antifungal. Then there's Aleve, generic is naproxen, and it's an NSAID. Vibramycin, generic is dicycline. It's an antibiotic tetracycline. Chlorcon is potassium chloride. It's an electrolyte. Then there's Elavil. Its generic is amitriptyline, and it's an antidepressant. Prevacid, generic is lansoprazole. It's a proton pump inhibitor. Actose is pioglitazone. It's an antidiabetic. Medrol is methylprednisolone. It's a steroid anti-inflammatory. Xylopren is allopurinol. It's a xanthine oxidase inhibitor. Tylenol 3 is codeine with acetaminophen. It's used for pain relief, and it's a DEA Schedule 3. Vasotec is a nalopril. It's an ACE inhibitor. Soma is carisprotol. It's a muscle relaxant. Flomax is tamsulosin, and it's a prostate receptor agonist. Vytorin is ezetimibe with simvastatin, and it's a cholesterol lowering drug. Seroquel is quetiapine, and it's an antipsychotic. Levaquin is levofloxacin. It's an antibiotic, quinolone. Fricor is fenofibrate. It's a cholesterol drug. Catapres is clonidine. It's an alpha receptor agonist. Phenergan is promethazine. It's anti-nausea / anti-emetic. Yas is ethinyl estradiol with drospirenone. It's birth control. Viagra is sildenafil, and it's used for erectile dysfunction. Celebrex is celecoxib. It's an NSAID COX-2 inhibitor. Proventil is albuterol. It's a beta agonist B2 for the lungs. OxyContin is oxycodone. It's used for pain relief, and it's a DEA Schedule 2. Lantus is insulin glargine, and it's an insulin. Nasonex is mometazone. It's a corticosteroid. Lyrica is pregabalin. It's an anticonvulsant / neurologic. Amaryl is flamiferine, and it's an antidiabetic. Restoril is temazepam, and it's a sleep aid, DEA Schedule 4. Sulfite is folic acid, and it's a mineral supplement. Premarin is conjugated estrogen, and it's estrogen replacement. Zetia is ezetimibe, and it's used for cholesterol. Aldactone is spironolactone, and it's a diuretic. Lanoxin, generic of that is digoxin, and it's an inotrope. Imdur is isosorbide mononitrate, and it's a nitrate vasodilator. Alnicef is ceftamir, and it's an antibiotic, cephalosporin. Altate is ramipril, and it's an ACE inhibitor. Nasacort is triamcinolone, it's an inhaled steroid. Ventolin is albuterol, and it's a bronchodilator. Cosar, generic of that is losartan, and it's an A2RB. Concerta is methylphenidate, and it's used to treat ADHD. It's a DEA Schedule II. Diabeta, the generic is glyburide, and it's an antidiabetic. Valtrex, generic is valcyclovir, it's an antiviral drug. Tamiflu, the generic of that is oseltamivir, and it's also an antiviral. It's used to treat flu. And PenVK is penicillin VK, and it's an antibiotic. That was the top 1 through 100 drugs, and that was courtesy of pharmacytechstudy.com. Alrighty then, and we shall continue the next 101 through 200 later on.